Hey there, budgeteers. Are you ready to unlock the power of each payday and take control of your finances like a boss? Introducing the Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits. This isn't your average budgeting tool. Oh no. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll harness the unique rhythm of your paychecks to supercharge your financial game. Say goodbye to the confusion of monthly budgets and hello to the clarity of every payday. You'll know exactly when money is coming in and when it's going out, giving you the edge you need to stay on top of your finances. But that's not all. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll easily spot whether you're rocking a surplus or facing a deficit. Armed with this knowledge, you'll make informed decisions that set you up for financial success. It's time to transform your relationship with money and create the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom. Get your hands on the Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits today and start making every dollar count. Don't let financial stress hold you back. Create a better plan for your money and seize the power of your pay period and thrive with the Payday Power Planner. Visit newmoneyhabits.com now to grab your free copy and unleash your financial potential. On this episode of the New Money Habits podcast, we're going to figure out how to get caught up when you're behind on bills. What's up, budgeteers, and welcome to the New Money Habits podcast. I'm your host and one of the co-founders of New Money Habits, Coach Nino Villa. Today on the New Money Habits podcast, we're going to find hope in seemingly hopeless situations, empower ourselves to take action, and explore the new money habits needed to improve your finances. If you have any questions, be sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on your favorite podcast platform, or tell your smart speaker to play the latest episode of the New Money Habits podcast. If you want to help out the show, consider leaving a 5-star rating and review. We cannot thank you enough for those 5-star ratings and reviews. They truly help us to spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money. Now let's get into today's episode. It is my hope that this episode brings a message of hope to anybody who is feeling like they are in a hopeless situation. When we get behind on our bills, like our rent or our mortgage, and all of a sudden the shelter that we have is in jeopardy, or when we're behind on our gas, electric, or water, and all of a sudden we can't even take a shower or do a load of laundry, things get to seem pretty dire. And this is a message that I'm all too familiar with. In my early and mid 20s, I was an absolute mess with money. And so everything was out of whack. I wasn't prioritizing things properly. And so I would get behind on rent, and that would mean being evicted from an apartment. I would get behind on my car payment. And so in my mid 20s, I remember having to surrender a car and taking that repossession hit on my credit, and countless other things that, whether I got behind on the electric bill and the electric went out, or got behind on the cell phone bill and they turned that off. I know what it's like to be behind on bills. And I know that there is a way out. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm a blue-collar kid from Buffalo, New York, raised by parents who, by all accounts, were poor. And to the extent that when my parents split, my father, for a period of time, lived in the repair shop that he ran because he couldn't afford the repair shop and an apartment. And I share that just to say, I get it. I know how bad it can get, and I know how hopeless it can seem. But there is a way out. And I want to share that today. I want to share some very practical, not just inspirational, you can get yourself out of that, but some very practical steps and practical tips that you can take in order to find your way out of that situation. The first thing I want to kind of address is oftentimes, and I see this time and time again as I sit down with new clients, is that our financial situation is usually a lot worse in our head than it is on paper. And so we may avoid staring our financial situation in the face because we're afraid of what we're going to see. And I noticed it pretty early on as I sat down with new clients. There was a lot of stress and anxiety and fear and just uncertainty in their voice as they're sharing their financial situation, as we're going through their income and their expenses and their debts, and perhaps they're behind, whatever that looked like. By the time we mapped it all out and put it down on paper and just stared at it, oftentimes my clients found, okay, my situation is not as bad as I thought. It's bad. I'm behind. I got debt, whatever, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. And I find that to be true all these years later. I've been coaching for 11 years, and it's no different today when I sit down with a new client than it was all those years ago. And so when we get it down on paper and we have an opportunity to look at it, we have a chance to look at it with some fresh eyes and maybe even a fresh perspective. And so the very first step is get the financial situation down on paper. And let's list out the income, the expenses. Let's identify which expenses we're behind on. Let's identify what debt we have, how much it is, and how much we owe on it monthly. And let's just get it down on paper so that we can see whether we're running a surplus or a deficit. And interestingly enough, when I sit down with new clients and at the end of it, they realize it's not as bad as they thought, it's because they usually have a surplus that they're just simply mismanaging, that they don't have a plan, and therefore they have no guardrails. And so they go off the rails, and it's easy to do so. And they might not have a significant surplus, but they have a surplus. But because that surplus is mismanaged, it feels like they're running a deficit. Now, there are times that I sit down with clients and they truly are running a deficit. And that is something that needs to be addressed. We talk about how to get the income up, how to get the expenses down so that we can manage that deficit. But more often than not, when we map out everything, and I mean everything, starting with putting food on the table, which most people don't even budget for. But when we map out putting food on the table, keeping a roof over your head, keeping the lights on, the water running, getting to and from work, and everything else, they're usually running a surplus. So now it's just a matter of managing that surplus. But those same individuals and couples may actually be behind on some bills, whether it's credit card bills, whether it's the electric bill, whether it's their mortgage. I sat down with a client once who him and his wife made far more than enough money to pay all of their bills. But when we sat down, they were something between 3 and 6 months behind on association dues. And that kind of drives me to my next point, which is about prioritizing our expenses. They simply did not prioritize paying their association dues. They had the money to do it, they just weren't. But before I get too far down the road of prioritizing, again, I just want to speak about the hope that lives in the simple task of writing your financial situation down on paper. Getting it on paper, out of your head and on paper, allows you to step back from it, look at it, and really evaluate it from an objective point of view. While it's in our brain does interesting math sometimes, and therefore, I think is one of the reasons why we think the situation's worse than it really is. It's because we're thinking about it, and we're thinking about it from 20 different perspectives, and there's subjectivity in there, and there's justification for this or that. But when we get our financial situation down on paper and we just write down, what is my income? What are my expenses? What bills am I behind on? What debt do I have? How much do I owe on it? How much do I pay on it every month? And we just have it down on paper, it becomes objective. These are just objective numbers. You got $4,000 coming in, you got $3,700 going out. Okay, there's actually a surplus there. Why do we never feel like we have a surplus? Let's objectively look at where we're spending that extra money. Because as you put it down on paper, you're gonna put down, more often than not, you're going to put down the regularly occurring expenses, not all the trips to the drive-through, not all of the impulsive spending at the grocery store. It's just going to be the things that you're like, okay, I need to put food on the table and I should be spending around $400 on that. So there's that $400, and I got a car payment, and I got rent, and I got this. You just get to look at it objectively. And so as scary as that step might sound, as daunting as that step might sound, there really is hope at the end of getting your income and expenses down on paper, because it's the first step to then being able to create a plan for that money, a plan for the income that's coming in, a plan for how to reduce or eliminate certain expenses as you're looking at them objectively and thinking to yourself, I don't know why I have a monthly subscription for that. Whatever your case may be, I don't bet, but I'm incredibly confident that once you get it down on paper, it won't be as bad as you think it is. Hey there, budgeteers. You know, good news can only be good news if there's bad news. So, what's the bad news? The bad news is you and I have a deadly disease called sin, and this disease causes us to rebel and disobey God. See, God is holy, righteous, and just, and He cannot be in the presence of sin. So this horrible disease of ours separates us from the God who created us. And the bad news gets worse. There isn't anything you or I can do to make ourselves right with God. We are dead in our sins and on our way to an eternity separated from God. But that's not God's will for us. See, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. God did what only God could do. He made a way for us to be reconciled to Him through Jesus Christ. Jesus came into the world to save sinners like you and me. While we were still sinners, storing up God's anger against us for our rebellion and disobedience, Christ died for us. Jesus took the punishment that you and I deserve and have earned. Jesus is the substitute for your punishment and mine. Now, isn't that some good news? The word gospel means good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that you and I broke God's law and Jesus paid the fine. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we get to experience God's grace and mercy. Our gratitude should turn us from our rebellious and disobedient sin toward God, seeking after Him and His righteousness. When we do, God gives us a new heart and a new mind. Praise God for His goodness, and remember, God loves, humans sin, Jesus saves. Okay, let me go back to prioritizing. Prioritizing expenses, prioritizing how you are going to manage your income. As I shared, in my early 20s, mid-20s, I was not prioritizing my money properly. Money would come in, and although I had obligations like rent, car payment, car insurance, cell phone, and a few other things, I did not prioritize those expenses. I prioritized going out with friends, which whether that meant going to a movie, going and shooting pool, going out to dinner, whatever that was, I prioritized entertainment over everything. And so it meant maybe, a couple of bucks for gas, but then it was, oh, you want to go to a movie? Yeah, let's go. Oh, you want to go out to this bar? Yeah, let's go. And I just simply did not prioritize. Now, while I grew up and matured, it doesn't necessarily mean that I fixed all of the problems. As I started dating my now wife, and when we moved in together, and I matured from there's somebody else who is relying on me to be a little bit more responsible, then some maturity, some growth came, but I still wasn't prioritizing everything properly. Now, there were different priorities that were out of whack. I'll give you a perfect example that you may be able to relate to. One of my priorities became making sure I paid my credit card because I was trying to maintain my credit score. But sometimes I would pay the credit card in lieu of something that was more important, like maybe the electric bill. Because the electric bill, I knew there was going to be some grace there. I knew that they weren't going to report to the credit bureau that I was 30 days behind. They would only report if I was completely delinquent, they had shut it off, and then I hadn't paid. And so I was paying credit card payments in lieu of paying utility bills because in my mind I was like, well, I know one is going to reflect poorly immediately and the other I can kind of buy some time on. And so I realized, okay, not only was I not prioritizing correctly in my early and mid 20s, but then even in my mid to late 20s, as I started prioritizing some things, I still wasn't prioritizing the right things. And so it's important that we identify our priorities and what needs to come to the top of the list and what needs to go to the bottom of the list, and then start to operate our plan for getting caught up by prioritizing what we're behind on. So let me solidify this. Let me make this concrete for you. We're going to do this in phases. The first phase is your priorities ought to be food, roof, utilities. Putting food on the table, keeping a roof over your head, keeping that water running and the lights on. If you are, one, not budgeting anything for food and you're only waiting until you've paid everything else to see how much money you have left over for food, I would argue that you don't have the right priority and you got to get food to the top of the priority list. Now it's about budgeting within reason, really determining how often do you go out, how often do you go to the grocery store, when you go to the grocery store, how much are you spending, and how long will that last? So how many times are you going to the grocery store throughout the month? And that'll help you to set up a food budget. If you need help with that, we also have a really cool tool on our website called the Food Number Calculator. It'll help you determine how much you should be spending on food. And so go to newmoneyhabits.com, click on helpful tools, and you can download the Food Number Calculator. But if you're behind on your rent, if you're behind on your utilities, these need to become priorities to be part of the plan to get caught up. So if you are running a surplus and you just didn't know it, you were mismanaging it, you would use that surplus to obviously get you back to square one. But if you're breaking even or even running a deficit, I'm going to ask you to shift your priorities. If we were working together, I'd say, hey, these other things that I'm going to talk about later that are way down on the priority list, we're not going to address those right now. We got to focus on getting you squared with your electricity or your rent or water bill. And so that is the first line of priorities: keeping food on the table, a roof over your head, and the utilities on. The second line of priorities are going to be what I call modern day necessities. And so this is going to include transportation, getting to and from work. It is going to include your cell phone and possibly even the internet. These are often modern day necessities, things we can't live without, or just makes things much more difficult to live without. And I want there to be a very large asterisk by when I say modern day necessity. When we think about a cell phone, while having a phone might be important, the type of phone and the type of plan you have can certainly be often revised. When my wife and I started our new money habits back in 2012, 2013, one of the things we decided to do was we got rid of a second car. I work from home, my wife stays at home, and so we just got rid of the second car and we managed to do life with one vehicle. And I was so inspired by doing that I also decided, hey babe, what if we shared a cell phone? And so instead of paying for two lines, we paid for one. And my wife thought I was a little bit crazy at the time. Like, are you serious? Is that where we're going? Is that what we need to do? Like, are things that bad that we have to share a phone line? And no, they weren't that bad, but I wanted to be that radical. I wanted to try doing things I had never done before to get results I had never seen before. And so she agreed for a season that we were going to go down to one cell phone. I got a Google Voice phone number so that she had her phone number and I could give out a different phone number, but it would just ring the same phone. And so we made that work for a season. That's just an example of how we can take a look at a modern day necessity and look at it in a new way, in a new perspective. Do you need the latest cell phone? Do you need that $700, $800, $1,200 cell phone? Do you need to be financing that cell phone every month? Do you need the plan that you have, or could you maybe go to even a different carrier where you're paying $25 a month, $50 a month, all in, nothing else, no phone payment, just for the service? And so just looking at those modern day necessities in a new way. The third level of priority would be other things like subscriptions. Not that you can really get behind on a subscription, but evaluating, do I need these subscriptions? And also taking a look at your debt and your credit cards. So look at what I just outlined there. In the third level of priority is credit cards. I told you earlier, I was prioritizing credit cards over the electric bill. And here I am to tell you all these years later, after coaching clients and doing some of this on my own and figuring it out the hard way, you do not prioritize a credit card payment over the electric bill. Pay the electric bill, and then if there's enough left over, we'll pay the credit card. And so if we're running a deficit, there's other things that we need to be looking at in order to manage that deficit. But oftentimes we're running a surplus. We can use the surplus for a few pay periods in order to get caught up, have a plan, and then get back to making sure that we're paying at least the minimum of our debt payments, our credit card payments, if not more, if not the whole thing, to avoid interest. And then the fourth line of priority is things like medical bills. So medical bills, zero interest, they might go to collections and that sort of thing, but I don't ever encourage my clients to prioritize a medical bill over putting food on the table, keeping a roof over their head. But that doesn't mean I haven't run across people who have prioritized that way. So if you're somebody who prioritizes, I have this medical bill and I got to pay it, I want you to pay your bills. I just want you to prioritize which bills you're paying when money is tight, when there is a deficit, or when you're trying to manage a surplus well. And I want to encourage everyone that everything and anything that you do to get caught up and to fix your financial situation is for a season. There's going to be a season of getting back on track, getting caught up, getting on track, And then you'll move out of the getting caught up season and getting on track season into the managing well season, into the flourishing season, into the I know what I'm doing with money now, and I'm behaving responsibly with money. And so it's just for a season to get you caught up, a season to get you stabilized, a season to get you ahead and managing things well. Real quick, I'll share another client story. I met with a client years ago, and when she and I first sat down, she was behind on 3, 4, maybe even 5 bills. I don't remember exactly how many it was. It was almost as if she was behind on everything. And when we got it down on paper, we took that first step and we got it down on paper, we realized that with the income coming in and the expenses that were going out, that there wasn't much of a surplus, but there was a surplus. So then we talked about how that surplus might have been mismanaged and what she was spending it on, and talked about just putting some parameters and some guidelines in to help not continue to squander any surplus. And she was incredibly receptive, and we got her caught up on all those past bills, 5 different past bills, I believe it was, because I know it was the electric, I know it was the cell phone, I believe it even included the car payment and a few others. But within the first 4 to 6 weeks, we were completely caught up on everything, no longer behind on anything, and we were moving within the next couple of pay periods into a place where she wasn't even making the payment late anymore. So at first, we were still maybe making a payment late, but we weren't behind. We weren't 30 days, 60 days, 90 days behind. It was, okay, you're not going to be able to pay that on the day you get paid, or on the day that it's due, because you're going to be paid a couple of days later. So we're going to be making a payment a couple of days late, but at least you're going to be current once you do. So we got to switch into that phase. And then within a week or 2 after that, we were now completely stabilized. And then the following month, it was, hey, you're going to pay this bill on time or early. So within a 6-week span, we went from being behind to on time and early. And so that's the hope of being able to put it down on paper, prioritizing correctly, making a plan, and then executing according to that plan. Hey there, budgeteers. Are you tired of feeling like your finances are running the show? Well, it's time to flip the script and take charge of your money with New Money Habits Financial Coaching. This isn't your typical financial advice. New Money Habits is about empowering you with the knowledge and tools you need to make savvy money moves and build a solid financial foundation. Here's the deal. We're offering a free discovery session to kickstart your journey to financial freedom. Yep, you heard me right. Free. In this session, one of our experienced coaches will help you to pinpoint your financial goals and create a better plan for your money. We're talking about mastering your money mindset, picking up practical money management skills, and having someone to hold you accountable along the way. So, if you're ready to kiss financial stress goodbye and say hello to a brighter financial future, then schedule your free session today to create the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom. Getting from behind to on time or early is going to require some new money habits. It's going to require doing things differently. And it starts with having a plan, putting things down on paper. We call it a budget. Here at New Money Habits, we actually call our budgeting form a Payday Power Planner. That'll help you to map out a plan for each paycheck according to your pay periods. That's why it's called the Payday Power Planner. And you can download that at newmoneyhabits.com and start using that to map out what is your income, what is your expenses, and doing that according to your pay period, not just the. But it's also going to require that you start thinking differently about money. As I shared, I prioritize going out and entertainment over even basic responsibilities. Then even when I got better at basic responsibilities, I had those out of whack priority-wise. And so you have to start thinking about money differently. You have to start thinking about managing your money in ways that you've never managed it before. So if you've never done a budget, it's time to do a budget. If you've done a monthly budget and you find that that's not working for you, it's time to budget according to pay period. And if you are budgeting according to pay period and you're doing all those things, but still just not executing well, now it's time to start thinking differently about getting some accountability, possibly sitting down with a coach and getting accountability that way, or speaking with somebody in your inner circle who you trust, who can also help you to remain accountable. But you start thinking differently about money. You have to relate to your money differently. This is a topic for another episode, but it bears a mention here that the way you relate to money is largely driven by all of the money lessons you learned through your adolescence and your teenage years. The lessons that you most likely learned subconsciously through observation. You didn't even know you were learning that lesson. I'll give you an example. Earlier, I mentioned that my father, for a time, couldn't afford to run his business and have an apartment, so he had a cot and literally slept in the repair shop that he owned and operated. Well, there's a lesson in that I learned about scarcity. I learned that sometimes there's just not enough. I learned how to maybe make the best of a bad situation, but I also learned some poor money lessons about there not being enough, not having enough. And so it shapes the way that I thought and behaved with money. And so we all have these lessons that we have observed and learned over the years, which require us to start thinking about money differently and relating to money differently. And as I said, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother episode, but there are all of these lessons that you have innately in you, and thoughts and behaviors and feelings you have about money that have been shaped by the way that you were raised and the way that you've managed money to date. And so we have to reprogram that. And then we have to literally manage the money differently, whether that means I'm doing a budget, but then I'm holding to that budget, whether it means I go to the ATM and I withdraw cash for certain categories in my budget so that I'm paying cash instead of paying with a debit card or a credit card. And so managing that money differently becomes part of building the new money habits needed for sustained success, right? We all want to kind of fix whatever issue we're in right now, but we also want to experience sustained success. And so if you're somebody who is behind on your bills, you want to get caught up, but you also want to build the new money habits that you need in order to avoid getting behind on your bills again in the future. You also want to surround yourself with like-minded people. And so joining the New Money Habits Facebook group might be one way that you can put yourself in a community of like-minded people, people who are thinking about their money differently, who are managing their money differently, so that you can ask questions. You can see when others share helpful tips and tricks about how it is that they're managing their money differently and how they're doing it well. I'll tell you, I was actually just on a call with one of my clients yesterday or the day before. Regardless, I was on with a client recently, and she was telling me a story about how her and her friends, who I just happened to coach three of her friends with her, that would be the four of them. The four of them were out and about talking, and they were having conversations about their incomes and the way that they manage their money and what they're investing in and those types of conversations, because they each have those conversations with me. And so they're empowered to have these conversations with others, especially when they know that these people share the same values and ideas. So they all know that they're all working with me. And so then they go off and they talk about their finances. I mean, who would have thunk it? So, just a kind of a humble brag moment. I'm completely humbled by the idea that, they're taking what they're learning and then they're conversing amongst each other and sharing tips and tricks. And like I use cash for this category, and I use this envelope thing that I got off of Amazon to house the cash, or whatever it is that they're talking about. But being surrounded by like-minded people, this client shared with me, she's like, Nino, it makes it so much easier. It makes it so much easier to do it and execute on it, because I'm surrounded by people who understand, who are speaking the same language, who share similar goals, who think about things in similar ways. And so it makes it easier for her to not only devise a plan, but adhere to and execute that plan. And so if you're looking for that, if you're looking for like-minded people, join our Facebook group. Join us on one of our workshops. Go to newmoneyhabits.com and go to helpful tools, and you'll see that not only do we have a bunch of tools, but we also offer workshops. And so if you're interested in joining a workshop so that you can be around like-minded people, check one of those out as well. And if you are so inclined, reach out and schedule your free discovery session with me or with one of the New Money Habits coaches. Maybe it's time. Maybe you have thought about doing things differently. Maybe you've even attempted to do things differently, but maybe there's a lack of accountability, or there's just a gap in some of the education and therefore the execution. So schedule a free discovery session. We'll sit down and we'll talk about what it is that you're looking to accomplish, what has tripped you up in the past and kept you from accomplishing those. We'll identify the roadblocks. We'll remove the roadblocks. We'll devise a plan that works for you. Part of a budget it's a personalized plan for your money. Yeah, we have a form to help you do that, but it really is personalized and individualized to your income, your expenses, your debt, and the financial situation that you got going on. So I hope you find hope in this message, that these are some practical steps that you can take toward getting caught up if you're behind, taking control of your money by putting it down on paper, looking at that situation and devising a plan, and a plan that prioritizes things like putting food on the table, keeping a roof over your head, and keeping the lights on and the water running at the top of the priority list, and then prioritize things like modern day necessities, then prioritize your debt, then prioritize things like medical bills, and prioritize those things so that you can work your way through a plan that gets you back on solid foundation, so that you can eventually find yourself managing a surplus and managing it well. That does it for this episode of the New Money Habits podcast. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review to help us spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money.